Hi, I'm Hazal Arslan, and today I'm going to be talking about prisons and different types of punishment. Firstly, I would like to talk about the functions of a prison and what it actually consists of. So, the criminal justice system itself helps identify all different types of crime and deals with them as needed appropriately. The criminal justice system does consist of various different agencies such as the CPS, the probation services, Crown and Magistrates Courts, but last and not least, the prison services, which it will be the main focus of this poster presentation today. The prison service performs certain functions, such as the stigmatizing effect. This refers to when someone is sent to prison, they automatically carry the criminal label with them, and this gives society a chance to distance themselves, and this may sometimes lead to prejudice. Another function could be the action function, and this refers to when an individual is sent to prison and the rest of society is assured that there is no longer an issue as they have been removed from circulation. This leads me on to the crime control and the due process models. These are two competing models within the criminal justice system that help explain how the offenders and the victims are treated within the sentencing process when a crime occurs. The crime control model focuses more on the reduction of crime and the increased powers of police and government to help protect society. In contrast, the due process model focuses more on the fairness, better and equal treatment, and also the rights of the victim rather than focusing solely on the offender as seen as in the crime control model. We could say that our prison system suits more of a crime control model. This is because it acts as a good form of incapacitation, in a sense that it does a good job of removing offenders from circulation in order to protect society. It also acts as a form of general deterrence, as when individuals observe someone getting punished for a certain type of behaviour, they are less likely to commit the same act to avoid being punished. So there are also two opposing approaches that can be used when defining and explaining the justification of punishment. The first approach focuses on preventing a further crime occurring in the future, and this is known as the consequentialist approach. The second approach focuses on the offence that has already happened, and this is known as the non-consequentialist approach. The non-consequentialist approach theory, also known as the retributive theory, very much focuses on punishing the offender. In addition to this, making sure the punishment chosen should be proportionate to the crime committed. As Lesnov also says in his journal article. In contrast to this, the consequentialist approach, which can also commonly be known as the utilitarian or the reductivism view, focuses on the idea of reducing crime, and the punishment is justified as, if there was no punishment, the consequences may have been more dire, so the punishment should be in accordance to the crime committed. As it could be said, the non-consequentialist approach has more of a retributivist aim. It could be argued that, in contrast, the consequentialist approach aims to be more of a deterrent, as seeing other people get punished would deter them from falling to the same consequences. It also acts as a rehabilitative aid, as it can take the desire away from offending from individuals. And lastly, the punishment of incapacitation physically takes the power and opportunity of offending from the individuals. So this leads me well onto whether the prison system really works in terms of incapacitation, deterrence, and rehabilitation. So a study by Phelps argued that the current criminal justice system has become more focused on punishing the inmates rather than focusing on rehabilitating them, and the reintegration, he described the reintegration of inmates back into society as race divided and violence ridden. In the late 1900s, experts believed that they could administer individual programs specialized to the inmate to treat the causes of their criminality and heal other mental illnesses they may have. However, when looking at the graph below, we can see that this was not likely, as here you can see that incarceration has been increasing since the 1900s, and also recidivism rates have also been increasing. Now, when it comes to incapacitation, here we can see that it's the act of removing the offender from the streets and placing them in prison. It can be assumed that the rate of crime would decrease as the individual is removed from society where they cannot commit crime. This is not necessarily true. Just because the offender is incarcerated, this does not mean that it is the end of their criminal career. As prisons are commonly referred to as universities of crime, it may be likely that the offender will learn more criminal behaviour from other inmates and make more dangerous connections this way. As a result, when returned and reintegrated back in society, the cycle is likely to continue, and as below, you can see the increase in the UK prison population since the 1900s. Now, in terms of deterrence, as you've probably guessed by now, prison is not effective. This is evident in the increasing rates of recidivism and incapacitation rates. Prisons are also known as universities of crime, as I've previously said, as criminals are in close contact with each other for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's very simple for more crime to be bred. As a result, I do believe that there should be other forms of not just punishment, but ways to help the offender and the victim after a crime has occurred. I thought that restorative justice would be a good idea for an alternate response to crime. It has in recent years become more popular. Restorative justice includes the practice of bringing the offender, the victim, and possibly others who have been affected from the crime committed, such as family or community members, together with a professional mediator to discuss the crime committed and how the individuals involved have been affected. Restorative justice could be considered a better alternative to incarceration, as it can act a better form of rehabilitation and deterrent. This is because when the offender and the victim are face to face, it could lead to the offender being able to sympathise more and understand the victim better in terms of how their actions have affected others. The Restorative Justice Council in 2008 have found that restorative justice has led to a 14% reduction in recidivism rates, and that 62% of individuals who have taken part in the conference said that it had made them feel better after the crime had been committed. When looking at the statistics, it could definitely be argued that restorative justice would be a more suitable alternative when it comes down to less serious crimes such as burglary, instead of short-term prison sentences, as it actually provides a form of rehabilitation and a mutual understanding of how the crime has affected the individuals. Okay, so just to conclude and kind of recap almost, as I feel like I've kind of rushed through everything out of nervousness, but the criminal justice system is made up of various different agencies, including the prison service, which performs a function such as the stigmatizing effect and the action function role. This then led me to speak about the two approaches used when justifying punishment, the consequentialism and non-consequentialism approaches, where I explained that non-consequentialism has more of a retributivist aim, and in contrast, consequentialism is known as the utilitarian or the reductivism view, as it focuses on the idea of reducing crime, and the punishment is justified, as if there was no punishment, the consequences it could be more dire, so the punishment should be in accordance to the crime committed. And also, consequentialism acts as a deterrent rehabilitative aid and works as a form of incapacitation as well. even though, as we know now, incapacitation does not always work well when trying to prevent crime in the long run, by the increase in recidivism and incarceration rates shown below in these two graphs here. We then talked about the two competing models in the criminal justice system, the due process and the crime control models shown here. And I think in terms of which model suits our prison best today, I would say crime control would probably suit best. And this is because it acts as a form of incapacitation, as it does a good job of removing offenders from society in order to protect society from them. And because it also acts as a form of general deterrence, because when individuals observe someone getting punished for something, they're less likely to commit the same act. And I think that prisons are, in my opinion, solely put in place solely as a way to punish and isolate the offender, as they don't help the victim in any shape or form, and doesn't help in any form of rehabilitation either, which I think is very backward looking, as today we know so much more, and how imprisoning someone is not enough to reduce crime rates. We need an alternative punishment or solution that acts as a rehabilitative aid as well. So I also reflected on how and if the prison service works well in terms of rehabilitation, deterrence and incapacitation, and we came to the conclusion that it doesn't really, when looking at the constant increase in the prison population and also the increase in recidivism rates in adult offenders since the 1900s. So as I mentioned before, due to this, I think the prison service has so much to improve on, as it seems the only function it seems to be that the offenders are enclosed altogether within its four walls, but doesn't really do anything in terms of solving the problem long term. For example, what happens in terms of after their prison sentence? There's no help for the offenders, so the cycle is only likely to continue, as the specific needs of inmates are simply not met within prisons. And this is evident in the increase of recidivism rates, because their criminal career is all they know and all they're familiar with. And lastly, I suggested that restorative justice should be an ideal alternative rather than short-term prison sentences for less serious crimes such as burglary or vandalism, as short-term prison sentences are not helpful as they are not long enough to help rehabilitate an offender. However, for less serious crimes, bringing the offender and the victim together with a mediator and letting them talk face to face about their feelings and how the crime committed has affected them both would be a lot more helpful, as it can help the offender sympathise and understand how the victim feels because of their actions, but also it can bring some closure to the victim. If they help talk to the offender, they can maybe understand the reasoning behind some of their actions. The fact that restorative justice is more helpful and effective, an effective alternative, can be very clearly seen in the 14% reduction in recidivism rates found by the Restorative Justice Council, and the 62% of individuals who had taken part in a restorative justice conference said that it had helped them make them feel better after the crime had been committed, and this was found by the Ministry of Justice. However, for more serious crimes such as murder or sex offences, I think that if prisons had more help inside in terms of classes or rehabilitative solutions, and more help when it comes to their mental health as well on top of this, long-term prison sentences would be more useful, as the offenders actually have the time to be rehabilitated and work on themselves. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and watch my poster presentation. My reference list, self-assessment form and a copy of this poster will be submitted together on Canvas for you to have a look at. If you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you again.